Told you I was going to keep coming back because I've got questions and they're never going to get answered, but I need to say them out loud because this is the kind of shit that keeps me awake at night, and it's probably bothering you too. So let's get into it. Because the Karen Read case is completely littered with witnesses who changed their stories multiple times, it's really hard to pin down what actually happened the night of 34 Fairview, right? And the difference between the waterfall and 34 Fairview and how everybody got home and how everybody came back the next day and when everybody found out, and all of that is a little bit of a blur because the stories and all the police reports and everything is different than what everybody said when they came into court. Today's questions revolve around Jen and Matt McCabe. I know, I have so many questions about Jen McCabe, I just can't shut up, but here's the deal. I guess the first thing I want to know is, did she and Matt arrive at Waterfall together? It was a Friday night. It's very possible. I know Brian and Nicole arrived separately. Nick and Karina Kolakithis. I nailed that. They arrived separately. So it's possible that the McCabes arrived separately because one maybe was at work, the other one was off doing this, and they met there and they took two different cars. So there's a couple of scenarios this presents. Jen and Matt have two cars at the Waterfall and they go separately to 34 Fairview. They leave a car at Waterfall and they drive together. Or they arrived at Waterfall together. I don't know because, again, all that early mishmash is unclear. But here's what we do know. We know that, and this is based on Jen's testimony and Karina's testimony, is that Matt and Nick were inside talking to the band. So everybody else had sort of exited. Everyone else was in the parking lot, but those two gentlemen stayed inside and they were talking to the band. So they kind of made it sound like they left later, which makes me think they both had their own vehicles there and the women drove away before them. And this would match up with Jen's verbiage that she uses that night. Remember at the Waterfall, she was trying to get Karen to go with her. And she said, "You're coming with me. You're riding with me." It wasn't us or come with me and Matt will drive us over because he's the soberest of us all. There's no mention of any other party. It's just you're coming with me, which gives me the impression that Jen had her car there and she was going to drive Karen, or she wanted to drive Karen. There's video of all of them in the parking lot at the Waterfall. So Karen and John are out in the parking lot. Jen and Karina are all out in the parking lot at the same time, which means this is when Nick and Matt are inside talking to the band. So it looks like all of these people sort of got, I guess, a head start. They would have left a few minutes before the men. Now, I know that Karen and John were parked in a different parking lot. So they had to walk to Karen's car and then they drove and then they got lost. So it took them probably 5 minutes longer to get to 34 Fairview than it would have taken anybody else. But if Jen left right then and went to 34 Fairview, it makes sense that she was there so much ahead of them and was literally texting directions while she was already at 34 Fairview. But if she and Matt only had one car and she had to wait for Matt, then she was minutes away. Like she hadn't left yet when Karen and John were probably getting in Karen's vehicle to drive away. So there's too narrow of a window. That would have put Jen in the car driving over there while she's trying to give instruction. And we know that's not true, because she's saying things like, again, pull behind me. She's not saying, you know, Matt's Tahoe's in the driveway, just pull right behind him. She's not mentioning anything about any other vehicle. It's me, me, me. So that's why I think she's there on her own. I think she drove on her own, and I think Matt drove separately, which means there would have been two McCabe vehicles at 34 Fairview. Like yesterday, I talked about Chris and Julie Albert. Were there extra Albert vehicles there as well? Now you're probably wondering, who gives a shit? Who cares who drove who and who drove where and who parked where? But it matters. This is 34 Fairview. We've all seen this. And we all know that there's a double garage and then basically a double driveway. And we know all the testimony is that the cars are kind of lined up here. And I'll show you some other visuals in a minute where you can see kind of what that looks like. But you can definitely park side by side with plenty of room in between and plenty of room on either side. And then you can really run about 3 deep. Like this is ample parking. So if we do the math, Brian Jr. is here. I said, did Colin drive himself? Maybe. So there might already be a couple of cars in the driveway when the adults come home. So you've got Nicole and Brian Albert drove separate. Higgins says he drove early and he plowed the driveway, which would give you the impression there's no cars here. But then Higgins also said he parked at the end of the driveway and nobody ever saw his Jeep. None of the 3 people in Ricky's truck saw a Jeep parked at the end of this driveway. And frankly, it makes it a little bit impossible that it was even there based on what the police are saying Karen's vehicle did. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is there might already be a couple cars there. Nicole and Brian Albert come home. They're in 2 separate cars. Well, yep, maybe Nicole or Caitlin are in one and then Brian's in the other. So they all arrive home. Then you're talking maybe Jen and Matt McCabe. So you're talking 2 more vehicles. So this driveway is pretty full. If Chris Albert and Julie Albert show up, that might be another vehicle. So there's a lot of vehicles in this driveway. The reason this is important is because, again, with this picture, you can see there's plenty of room between. So this makes it entirely feasible that Karen could have pulled up at the end of the driveway because Higgins Jeep sure shit wasn't here. She could have pulled up here because Ryan Nagel says he saw brake lights. So she stops right here. John jumps out and John walks up the middle. And then at the same time, Julie Nagel comes out and Julie Nagel walks down this way. So if this is a great example because we've been hearing that the McCabes drive some sort of Tahoe or Yukon, like a really big SUV. So if this is a big SUV and one person's on one side of it and one person's on the other side of it, and it's a dark, snowy night, it's possible those 2 people could walk right past each other and not even hear each other, not even see each other. But that's not even why I'm making this video. The reason I'm making this video is because if the McCabes had 2 cars there, when they went to leave, they obviously just got in one, right? Because they gave Julie and Sarah a ride home, which wasn't in their early police reports. The very first thing that Jen and Matt McCabe said was, we went home and we left at about this time. And this was the time we got home until someone got their phone data and their GPS data and their Apple data. And they went, well, okay, so maybe that's not exactly the time frame. We dropped off one of Brian Jr.'s friends on the way, meaning Julie. And then it was, oh, well, wait, hold on. We dropped off 2 of Brian Jr.'s friends. And I think that they fibbed because they wanted to keep Julie and Sarah Levinson out of the police reports. They wanted those names out because those are not family and they can't guarantee that those 2 will stay quiet. So they didn't want their names brought up. They didn't want to mention that we drove by and we didn't see anything on the lawn, but we were alone in our car. No, you weren't, but they didn't want to tell the police that in the beginning. But here's what still bothers me. If they drove 2 cars to 34 Fairview, then where's the second car? That means they left one of the McCabe vehicles at 34 Fairview overnight. So there's another vehicle, potentially a Chris or Julie Albert vehicle might have been there, but now we're talking a McCabe vehicle as well. Now the next morning when Jen happens to find John on the lawn, she calls her husband and she says Matt arrived, and Matt did arrive. He arrived at like 6:30 in the morning, right about the time she's trying to go in the house. Matt arrives. So again, we're back to 2 McCabe cars at 34 Fairview. They give their statement to Lenk. They all sit around the kitchen table and do their kumbaya, let's make shit up, call Lenk back. They're still sitting around the kitchen table. But at some point, Proctor reaches out to Jen McCabe and says, we need to come interview you. And she says, well, I need to go home because I haven't been home all morning. You know, basically she makes it seem like she's sort of been stuck at 34 Fairview without a ride. But that wouldn't be possible because there's 2 fucking McCabe vehicles there by my math. So at any time she could have gone home and checked on her kids. She didn't want to. And I guess Matt didn't either. But I think I haven't been home to check on my kids was a ploy to keep Proctor away from 34 Fairview. They didn't want Proctor to come inside that home and do interviews inside the home. So they moved it all over to the McCabe's house under the guise that Jen's like, I'm just a soccer mom and I got to get home to my kids. And so Proctor agrees that they can all, Albert, everybody can go to the McCabe's house and that's where they'll do the interviews. I think there were plenty of McCabe vehicles there. I think at any time Matt or Jen, they weren't being held hostage. At any time they could have left and gone home. They stuck together because they were all so goddamn scared that someone wouldn't get the story straight if they separated.